the formal vote of welcome address to start off the proceedings. Makhanda, need to unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, Makhanda. Need to unmute yourself.
Good evening, everybody. Today's webinar is going to be one of the landmark in the series of webinars our association has hosted so far. I, President of the Income Tax Bar Association, on behalf of my association, welcome Senior Advocate, the legend in lifetime, and one of the best lawyers in taxation law today, Sri J.P. Khaitan, to this webinar. Sri J.P. Khaitan is going to speak on Introduction to Benami Law. I am sure his deliberation on the subject shall clear the various aspects on the subject of Benami. Our today's speaker and senior advocate will positively clear all these doubts to the satisfaction of the entire audience. With these words, I inaugurate today's webinar and hand over the mic back to Siddharth Rai. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would now request the Secretary of the Income Tax Bar Association, Calcutta, Sri Manoj Kataruka, to formally introduce the speaker today. Manoj.
Thank you, Siddharth. JP sir needs no introduction, but I'll do my duty. After clearing his CA final examination, Mr. Khaitan worked with the chambers of the renowned Sri R.N. Bajoria, senior advocate, whilst he was a student of law. He was enrolled as an advocate in 1983 and was designated as a senior advocate in 2005. Mr. Khaitan's practice primarily revolves in the field of tax and other money-related statutes, where his vast and combined experience in accountancy and law has resulted in several landmark judgments that have aided the department and taxpayers alike. As a senior advocate, he is well known for his honesty, integrity, simplicity, humility, and genuineness, and his clients are assured of success once he accepts a brief. This is a short profile, but this short profile does not take away the fact of the volume JP sir work speaks. And we also have Shri S.K. Tulsian sir, a legal luminary in taxation, who would probably highlight more on that. Thank you, Siddharth.
Thank you, Manoj. I would now request our past president, Shri S.K. Tulsian, a legal luminary, of course, to carry on with the proceedings and moderate today's webinar. Sai, I hand it over to you, sir.
Honorable President, Makhan Chand Haldar, Secretary, Manoj Kataruka, Siddhartho, all highly respected senior advocates, Sri J.P. Khaitan, who has chosen to hold today's webinar on the prohibition of Benami property transactions, which is one of the burning subject today before all the tax professionals. And he is the one who has piloted many landmark cases in the High Court at Calcutta successfully, whereupon he has acquired a dominant position in regard to the knowledge of this subject. And therefore, we would like him today to enlighten us on the various aspects of this law, more particularly to emphasize upon the nature of transactions which can come within the ambit of Benami Prohibition Act. He should also highlight the provisions of Section 24, wherein the Act provides that it is requirement of law that the reason to believe must be recorded before initiating of the proceeding, and reason to believe is something which requires the material and information both to be on record before recording of such satisfaction, I also would like him to please speak in regards to issue of summon under section 19, because section 19 talks of issuing of summon for the purpose of this act, means the Benami Prohibition Act. So can the summons under section 19 be issued indiscriminately without bringing the subject on record? Because when a person is summoned, he should be summoned with a specific requirement to deliver as a witness on the subject on which the Benami proceeding has already been initiated or is sought to be initiated. So therefore, I would like him to highlight on the various aspects of these laws. I would also like him to speak on his revered judgments on these subjects, more particularly on Ganpati Dalcom and Deific Award LLP. In both the cases, he has successfully piloted the case before the Calcutta High Court and to enlighten us with his deep knowledge of the subject. With these, I would request Honorable Sri J.P. Khetan sir to proceed with his talk on the subject. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends. I quite realize that a lot of us must be under pressures to meet the deadline of 31st, but I sort of didn't realize that that may keep some of us away, but I'm sure it is being recorded. So if at any time in future anyone wants to listen to what has been deliberated today, it will be available. So now to the subject. Originally, the Law Commission in 1973 proposed that there should be a law to prohibit the original owner, the person who had provided the consideration for purchasing the property, from recovering the property. So if I have paid the money and the property is held in the name of X, so the Law Commission said that there must be a law prohibiting me from recovering that property. So that because of that report of the Law Commission, in 1988, several years later, 1988, May 1988, an ordinance was promulgated. The ordinance had only 4 sections. Now, I had sent that ordinance to Siddharth, so you can just put it up, just to give you a quick view of what the ordinance was.
Sir, I hope it is visible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can just scroll. I have written in, at the top on the left hand side, there are 4 sections only, and if you can just scroll up. Now, so this is the first is the short title, extent and commencement, and then please look at section 2, prohibition of the right to recover property held benami. So this was I will not trouble you with reading the whole of the provision. So the recommendation of the Law Commission was given effect by saying that the right to recover, one shall not have the right to recover property which is held benami. So that was the substance of this act. Now, then section 3 was because of to take care of other provisions, and then they repealed the provisions in the Trust Act and the Income Tax Act, because the subject matter was being taken care of by this. So now, this was the substance of the act. Now let us go to the act which replaced this ordinance on 5th September 1988. So that if you can have that now. The 1988 Act, which was actually an act of 9 sections. So, can we have that 1988 Act now?
Could you see this, sir?
Yeah, this one you can remove and bring that other 1988 Act now.
So is it visible?
Yes, it is now. Yeah. So yeah, as you can see from the index, there are 9 sections now. So original act or the ordinance was 4 sections, came into effect on 19th May 88. Now let us scroll down and I will show you section 1, subsection 3. The provisions of sections 3, 5, and 8 shall come into force at once. Now, at once, you can see the date on the right-hand side, the top 5th September 1988. So the 3, 5, and 8 shall come into force at once, and the remaining provisions shall be deemed to have come into force on 19th May 88. So why 3, 5, and 8 in September and the rest shall be deemed to have come into force from May 1980? The reason was that 3, 5, and 8 were new sections introduced for the first time in the Act, which did not find place in the ordinance. Now let us see what section 3, what the new section 3 said. Prohibition of Benami transactions. So it said no person shall enter into any Benami transaction. The previous, the ordinance only said prevented the owner from recovering the property. There's no bar, no prohibition. Now this was introduced for the first time. Now have a look at the exclusion under subsection 2. Purchase of property held by any person in the name of his wife or unmarried daughter. So this was an exclusion from the application of Benami. Then when we hold these shares or mutual fund units in this where the depositories, the holding is with the depository, he actually represents the original owner. So these were the 2 exclusions made from the operation of the from the prohibition which was enacted by section 3. Now let us look at section 4. Section 4 is the same as the as section 2 of the ordinance, namely that prohibition of the right to recover property held Benami. So this is the old section 2, now section 4. Then let's move on. Now section 5. This 3, 5, and 8. So these are the new. So 5, property held Benami liable to acquisition. All properties held Benami shall be liable to. This part can't be read on the screen. At least I think the images are overlapping. So all properties held Benami shall be subject to acquisition by such authority in such manner and after following such procedure as may be prescribed. So this again was a new provision. It was not the ordinance did not provide for any such step. And then we scroll down to 8. The central government may, by notification in the official gazette, make rules for carrying out the purposes of this act. In particular, and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, such rules may provide for all or any of the following matters: the authority competent to acquire properties under section 5, the manner in which the procedure and the procedure to be followed for the acquisition of property under section 5, any other matter. So in order to give effect to rule section 5, because the authority as well as the procedure and the manner had to be prescribed. So that rulemaking power was conferred by section 8 in order to give effect to section 5. So all these 3 provisions being new: 1, prohibition on entering into Benami transaction; 2, for acquisition of Benami property; and 3, rules to give effect to Section 5. These were all brought in for the first time, and these were therefore given effect from September, 5th September 88, when the Act came. Now, the interesting part is that these rules, which were required to be made in order to make Section 5 workable, were never made. These rules were never made, and in fact, this aspect was noted by the Supreme Court in a judgment which is in the case of Can Bank Financial Services versus Custodian. This is reported in Supreme Court cases, volume 2, the year is 2004, volume 8, SCC 355. And the Supreme Court in paragraph 67 and 76 has noted that Section 5 was not made workable because these provisions the rules were not made. So this is the law, how the law stood until 28 years later, when the Amendment Act was made. Now, what did the Amendment Act do? It converted an act of 9 sections into 72 sections. Now, it also gave a new name to the act. Even the name of the act was amended. Now, as we can see, if we can just scroll down to now, just stay with Section 1. Section 1. This act may be called the Prohibition of Benami Property Transactions Act 1988. The original act was named Benami Transactions Prohibition Act, and now it is called Prohibition of Benami Property Transactions Act 1988. The prohibitions is probably, the S is an extra. Well, that's how the book was printed, so it is appearing as a plural, but I should think it must be prohibition. Now, so what happened by virtue of the Amendment Act, which was given effect from 1st November 2016, 28 years after the original act was made. So basically, apart from changing the name, this definition section, it's the sections, the clauses, several clauses have been added. The old definition section had 3 clauses, 3 definitions. Now there are 30 definition clauses. Then Section 3 of the 88 Act regarding this prohibition on Benami, even that was, I'll get into a little more detail, but I'm just giving you a broad overview. You can keep on scrolling up. You can scroll up, please. Now, section just keep on scrolling up. Yeah. Right. So see, it goes up to 30, 31, and then now scroll up. So now section 3 is the prohibition of Benami transaction. Even this section was amended. Then please scroll up. Then section 4 has been amended. This prohibition of the right to recover, even that has been amended. And then 5. Now look at 5. 5, the old section 5 spoke of acquisition. The new section 5, which has been substituted, it speaks of confiscation. So even section 5 was substituted. Then we can look at section 6, prohibition on retransfer So this section 6 was not there in the old act. Now, what has happened here is that after this, after section 6, there's a chapter 3. Now you will not find it on your screen, but chapter 3, sections 7 to 23 are the authorities, their powers and jurisdiction. Then chapter 4 has been added, which provides for attachment. You will not find it on your screens because actually I wish I had sent the index. That would have helped help you realize the extent of changes, but I have not done that. So after section 6, there's chapter 3 added, section containing section 7 to 23, defining authorities, powers and jurisdiction. Chapter 4, sections 24 to 29, providing for attachment, adjudication and confiscation and vesting. So this for the first time from 1st November 2016, that what section, the old section 5 spoke of about acquisition of property by the authority and the manner and procedure for acquiring, that the prescription which was envisaged to be made for the purpose of section 5 was never made. Instead, they brought in a provision for confiscation and the who is to exercise that power and the manner and the procedure. All that came to be prescribed for the first time ever from 1st November 2016. So sections 24 to 29 are dealing with attachment, adjudication. I will elaborate a little more later. Attachment, adjudication, confiscation, vesting. Then chapter 5 has been added, containing sections 30 to 49, which relates to the appeals to the appellate tribunal. Then sections 50 to 52 have been added by way of chapter 6, which is for special courts, that is for prosecution for criminal offenses. Then chapter 7 has been added, containing sections 50 to 53, describing the offenses and the prosecution, the prosecution and the consequences thereof. Now, then chapter 8 has been added, containing sections 56 to 71. These are called the miscellaneous provisions. And the old section 9 has become now the new section 72. So there's actually, I would think that the previous law was completely changed. There's very little reflection of the old law, as it was made, and an entire new set of new provisions were incorporated. Now, if I can tell you what are the new things in this, I will once again go back to Siddharth, if you can just open this 2016 extract, and we will look at section 2. Yeah, we can go right up. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So this is now the definition section. Now we can scroll up to section 2, clause 8. Just 1 minute. Can you scroll down, please? I think the old sections are reproduced in the footnote.
So you want me to go down?
No, yeah, just go up to section 2, the previous page, just the previous page. Yeah, just look at the footnote. Yeah, right here. You can stop here. See, the old definitions are here. Benami transaction means in the footnote. Benami transaction means any transaction in which property is transferred to one person for consideration paid or provided by another person. So this was the definition of Benami. B, prescribed. C, property. Now, property also means property of any kind, whether movable or immovable, tangible or intangible. And includes any right or interest in such property. So this is the sum total of the previous definition clause. Now let us go to clause 8 of the, you can scroll down to clause 8 of section. So Benami property is the definition. There's no definition in the previous law of Benami property. And now it says Benami property means any property which is the subject matter of a Benami transaction and also includes proceeds from such property. So this is very important, because even the proceeds from the Benami property. So once the property has been converted, let us say it was immovable property, and if the property has been sold, then the money which is coming from the sale, that is regarded as Benami property. So this is an expansion in the, we wouldn't have with reference to the original law included the proceeds into the definition of Benami property, but this act has done that. Then let us look at subsection 9. Benami transaction means. Now, subsection 9 is comprising of clauses capital A to capital D, and then there's an explanation. I'll just stop here. The old definition was just that is only forming part of small a of capital A. If you, I'll just read out the old definition. Benami transaction means any transaction in which property is transferred to one person for a consideration paid or provided by another person. Now let us look at the new one. A means a transaction or an arrangement where a property is transferred to or is held by. Now this held by was not, those words were not there in the old section. A person, and the consideration for such property has been provided or paid by another person. So the old definition of Benami transaction is finding place in clause A, but clause A is expanded again to include a situation where property is held. So then apart from this small a, there are so many other things which have been added. Clause B but clause B you can say was implicit in the old definition because the Benamdar must hold the property for the immediate or future benefit, direct or indirect, of the person who has provided the consideration. That is implicit in any Benami transaction. Then follow the exceptions. Now, if you remember the exceptions in the old law, they were for wife and unmarried daughter, and but the other was the depository situation. But now let us see the exceptions. The exceptions have been enlarged to include the HUF situation. Then the depository part in clause II has been expanded to include where property is held in a fiduciary capacity. Then Roman 3. This is Roman 3 now covers spouse or any child. The old law was spouse or the wife or the unmarried daughter, but now it says spouse or any child. So again, the exclusion has been expanded. And then the clause for any person in the name of his brother or sister, lineal ascendant or descendant. So this again is an expansion of the exclusion. So not only has the definition of Benami transaction been expanded, the exclusions have also been expanded because the new definition has a wider coverage. Then clause the capital B, a transaction or an arrangement in respect of property carried out or made in a fictitious name. C, transaction or an arrangement in respect of property where the owner of the property is not aware of or denies knowledge of such ownership. D, a transaction or an arrangement in respect of a property where the person providing the consideration is not traceable or is fictitious. So, you know, there is a substantial expansion of the definition of Benami, because essentially in a Benami situation, there will be three people involved. One is the person who's selling the property. So he is sort of independent. He's unconnected. He's selling the property for money. So let us say A is selling his property for money. Now, B is providing the money, but the property is being purchased in the name of C. So that is what the old section covered. So there had to be three people. Now the present provision also takes into account a situation where there's a fictitious person, that is somebody who does not exist. So, you know, the implications of this section will have to be worked out in, you know, as and when the matters arise. But like, I can give you one example. I have come across cases where clause D has been invoked in a situation where a company has purchased property and the money for the purchase has come from the shareholders of the company into the company as share capital. So maybe some premium also. So shareholders contributing share capital in to the company, and the company then goes ahead and buys the property. So the company buys the property in its own name. Now, the authorities administering this law are the income tax authority. So they have invoked, because they think that there are issues with the share subscription, the source of the money which has come into the company by way of share capital. They're concerned about that. They are concerned that no income tax has been paid on the money which has come into the company. So they have invoked the provisions of this act in such cases, and they say that the shareholders are the beneficial owners and the company is the benamdar. Now, to my mind, in such a situation, it's only the income tax law which should be applied to find out to get into the source of the share capital and whether it has been taxed or it should be taxed or not taxed. That is an income tax question. But where the shareholder puts in money into his company by way of share capital, and that company goes ahead and buys shares, buys property in its own name, I don't see a Benami situation here at all. In fact, there's one decision which has come on this. It is of the Rajasthan High Court. See, the logic is that when the company buys the property, the shareholder has cannot say that he is the owner of the property. He can get something from the company only when it is wound up. So at the time of dissolution, when the capital is being paid back to the shareholders, so that's the only right that he has. The present right of the shareholder is to get dividend and to vote at the meetings. But he cannot say that any property of the company is his property. So that is the old decision of Bachaev Gazdar. So the Rajasthan High Court in 131 taxman.com 99 has dealt with this situation and said that the shareholders cannot be said to be beneficial owner of the company's property, and the Benami law cannot be invoked. The one other situation I came across, and there are several decisions on this, where employers post demonetization or just about then, employers gave advances to employees in demonetized currency, and the department sought to invoke the Benami law. So the decisions have been to the effect that the revenue has not been able to establish Benami, and that is I can give you one citation, that is 2018 100 taxman.com 179. So these are two instances. Now, Benami will always be a question of fact, because the way the definition is worded, the revenue will always have to establish on facts that it is a situation to which the definition of Benami transaction applies, and there is in fact a situation of a property being held Benami. So in that demonetization case, it was held that the revenue had not established that the advance was given to the employee just for the sake of showing it in that way, but the employee was really holding the money for the employer. Because that's when the question of Benami comes in, because I have to pay salary to my clerk, so I have given him an advance on account of salary, but not meaning to give it away. I have told my clerk that, look, this money remains mine. I have given it to you, and now you can put it in your bank account, but the money remains mine. So that's a situation of where the Benami law can come in. But on facts, it was held that the department had not established it to be a case of Benami, which means that it was not shown that the employee continued to hold the money for me. If it is the employee's money, then where is the question of Benami? I paid in advance to the employee, and it is his money to use as he wishes. So now then, so this is the definition of Benami property, Benami transaction. Then a definition of Benamdar has also been added. That is in section 2, clause 10. A definition of beneficial owner has been added in section 2, clause 12. And then after section 30, there's a residuary clause 31, which says that the words not defined in the Benami law will carry the meanings as in the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, the Limited Liability Partnership Act, the Companies Act 2013, LLPs 2008, PMLAs 2002. So those definitions are adopted for the purposes of this particular law. Now, the procedure, the section 24, that's the first step which the revenue will take in order to invoke. So section 24 requires the initiating officer, on the basis of material in his possession, to form the belief that any person is a Benamdar in respect of a property, and then he has to record reasons, and thereafter issue a notice to the person to show cause within the time specified as to why the property should not be treated as Benami. Now, it's a serious matter. See, to allege Benami is a serious matter because you want to say that the person in whose name the property is held, he is not the owner. He is not the beneficial owner. Somebody else is the beneficial owner. So, it is the beneficial owner who has actually provided the funds for it. So these are factual matters, and there must be material on the basis of which such a belief can be found. And as I said, it's a serious matter because the act has consequences by way of criminal prosecution. The act has consequences by way of confiscation. So subsection 1 requires the recording of reasons for the belief, and the belief must be based on material. So these are very important ingredients which must be fulfilled before jurisdiction is assumed. And if you look at subsection 2, it says it requires a notice to be given to the beneficial owner also. So subsection 1 notice has to go to the Benamdar, and subsection 2 says it must also go to the beneficial owner. So because it's the beneficial owner who's also going to be affected. So the law contemplates that both parties must be involved in this particular process. So these are so this is how things start. Now, before this particular notice is adjudicated, the officer can do a provisional attachment, and then he decides thereafter, takes a decision thereafter, after a response is given. So he then decides whether I missed a step here. So after issuing the notice, if he thinks that the property may be transferred, may be alienated, so then he does a provisional attachment, where and then when he decides thereafter, after hearing and representations, whether to continue the provisional attachment or not. If in the first instance he's not done a provisional attachment, then after they reply to the notice and representations, he decides whether to attach it or not. And if he decides to attach it or to retain the attachment, then he makes a reference to the adjudicating authority under section 26. And the adjudicating authority, then there's a detailed procedure in section 26, and timelines are provided for the purpose of adjudicating the question of Benami transaction, and he will. So the decision which the adjudicating authority takes is under subsection 3, and he can pass an order holding the property not to be a Benami property and revoking the attachment, or holding the property to be a Benami property and confirming the attachment. So he gives really a finding finally that whether it's a Benami property or not. And the consequence of holding the property to be Benami is confiscation, which is under section 27, which requires a separate order to be passed. So once an adjudication is made under section 26, an appeal lies to the tribunal under section 46 against an adjudication under section 26(3). Now, section 27 provides for once the confiscation is ordered, then the vesting is free from all encumbrances. So again, this is whereas the old section 5 provided for acquisition, and it didn't say acquisition free from all encumbrances. This section provides for confiscation and vesting free from all encumbrances. So this is now to go back to section 19, which is the section relating to powers of authorities. So that power of authorities, I think the starting point in my view would have to be a section 24 situation where where the notice is issued after recording reasons on the basis of material, that it is a where the act is sought to be invoked for the first time in respect of the in respect of a property and in respect of a transaction and the persons involved. So it is only once the act is invoked, then the powers of under section 19 can be brought into play, because the section, if you look at the index of to this particular act, it talks about adjudication and attachment and adjudication. It does not specifically talk about investigation. So that investigation the authorities must do on their own under the act, because they must have the materials on the basis of which the belief is formed and the show cause notice is issued. So strictly speaking, the power to invoke the act, once it is decided to invoke the act, then I can be subjected to the provisions of the this particular law, but without there being the formation of the belief on the basis of materials, I think it will be very difficult. It will not be within the jurisdiction of the authorities to just issue me a summons under this particular law, because in order to find facts, I mean, unless why should a particular law which has drastic consequences be applied to me in the first place at all? So why should I have to face a summons under this particular law if the act is not applicable to me at all? So it'll be in the nature of a fishing and roaming its investigation. So I think that is a point which should be available. If I am just issued a summons without there being anything on record to suggest that it is a case of it is a transaction to which this act applies at all. Now, these are the points which Mr. Tulshan had touched upon. Is specifically touched upon. Now, there is a very sort of a legal point involved here as to whether this particular act, as amended with effect from 1st November 2016, that will apply to transactions which took place before 1st November 2016. So that is a question on which there has been much debate. There are decisions on both sides. I could actually get into details of that, but I don't think that that kind of time is available, because I was told that the talk should be of about 45 minutes, and but there's a lot to be said, and actually the judgment of the Calcutta High Court, the matter in which I had the privilege of appearing, it does not reflect all the arguments that were made, but I do believe that there are very substantial arguments available to say that the 2016 amendments are applicable only to transactions taking place from 1st November 2016, and they cannot apply to so transactions which are taking place up to, say, 31st of October 2016. But to give you the decisions, there's 414 ITR 358. It's a Supreme Court judgment. It dealt with a civil matter, but there are observations there to say that the 2016 amendments will not apply to the old transaction. Then there is Rajasthan High Court in 107 taxman.com, page 272, which is, it says that the amendments are not retrospective. There's a Bombay judgment, 2017, volume 3 TMI, Tax Management India 1618. Then there's the Calcutta judgment 421 ITF 483. This is the division bench judgment against which the revenue has gone to the Supreme Court. And the this particular judgment was because Supreme Court has granted stay. So what is the effect of the stay granted by the Supreme Court? That was considered in by the Calcutta High Court in 437 ITR 397, and it was ruled that the division bench judgment, the effect of the judgment continues to operate, and the stay which is granted operates only between the parties to the litigation which has traveled up to the Supreme Court. A stay granted by the Supreme Court is not declaration of law under Article 141, so as to override the judgment of the division bench, which has considered the matter and laid down the law. So on that basis, that 437 ITR 397 has granted stay in matters which have subsequent matters. Now the contra view, this Chhattisgarh High Court 112 taxman.com, page 129, and there is a Delhi High Court 101 taxman.com 319. So these are the divergent opinions. Now there's a lot of play on that section 1 clause 3 where it is said that sections 3, 5 and 8 shall come into force at once, and the other provisions shall be deemed to have come into force on 19th May 88. So because of that, the revenue says that the whole of the act, except for sections 3, 5 and 8, which will be deemed, which came into force on 5th September 88, the rest of the law, everything goes back to 19th May 88. But that's not a very plausible argument, because if you go back to May 1988, the only provision in the act was, the ordinance was, that the ostensible owner, the beneficial owner was prohibited from recovering the property. That's all that the act provided then. 19 May section 2 of the ordinance, which became section 4 in the act, prohibition upon the beneficial owner from recovering the property held benami. There was no prohibition from doing a benami transaction in May 88. There was no provision for prosecuting. Well, prosecution was there, but there was no provision for acquisition. There was no rule-making power. So to say that everything now, and you would have seen that the definitions have been taken from the that clause 31 of the definition clause. It refers to Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, refers to Companies Act 2013, Limited Liability Partnership Law 2008. So these laws were not even made. I mean, they were obviously not made in 1988. So to say that the whole of the amendments of 2016 now are effective from 1980, I think it's a very difficult proposition. There are many more aspects. I have analyzed those, but I don't think that the time today permits me to go into all of them. For some reason, the many points that are available are not really reflected in the judgments which have come out. But the Calcutta High Court had, when the matter was heard, the bench had asked for notes. So I had at that time prepared notes which are a bit elaborate, because it was a new law, and the new law in the sense of the amendments were absolutely new. So there are many points which I had sort of highlighted in the note, and so I hope that those will all be considered. They need to be considered by the Supreme Court whenever the matter is taken up, because I think it will be wholly unfair to apply the 2016 amendments to a transaction pre-2016, because see, the only disability prior to 2016 was that the beneficial owner could not recover the property. But the 2016 amendment brings in the confiscation of property. So this was not a a consequence provided for under the old law. It provided for acquisition, but that section was never given effect. So to now say that the old transaction will be subjected to this new consequence of confiscation, which was not, because under the General Clauses Act, Section 6 of the General Clauses Act, those the rights kind of get crystallized, and those vested rights. So the vested right would be that the person cannot be he only the only consequence he could face was that he could not recover the property, and even the punishment under the old law was punishment for 3 years or up to 3 years, or fine, or both. So there's but now, of course, the law, the punishment is 1 to 7 years and fine up to 25% of the fair market value. And now, apart from the beneficial owner and benamdar, even an abettor has been included. So there's much to be said, regarding the retrospective operation which the revenue proposes to give to the, or has been seeking to give to the 2016 amendments. So I think I will stop here now, because we're just close to completing an hour, and so I hope it was I've been able to provide some food for thought.
Thank you, Ketan sir, for a very lovely, in-depth exposition of the Benami Prohibition Transaction Act, which, but for you, would not have been so clearly defined. The issues relating to the retrospectivity has been well explained by you. You also have very clearly brought out that a company being a separate, independent legal entity under the law, the money provided by the shareholders cannot be treated as benamdar's money. Thereby, the property acquired by the company cannot come within the sweep of this prohibition of the Benami Property Transaction Act 1988. Your clarity in respect of section 19 summon, wherein you have also very clearly brought out that unless formation of belief takes place and proceeding under section 24 is initiated, that summon will be without jurisdiction. So these were the very burning issues which were actually keeping people on touch. And moreover, your beautiful exposition about the retrospectivity as to why 1988 Act and the present Act being completely different, both in the areas and also the consequence. The retrospectivity cannot be merely because the rest of the 4 sections were made applicable from a particular date in 1988. So therefore, these deliberation of yours will be put on the YouTube for the viewers to see, so that they can also be hugely benefited by your this exposition. I think your speech of 1 hour on this subject is quite insufficient to address many other issues which are in this act and which actually is something which requires to be addressed. So we will have another session on this act itself with you, so that another 1 hour session probably clear the rest of the issues which needs deliberation. With these words, I would like to really profoundly express my gratitude to you for joining today's webinar and bringing clarity to many of the burning issues arising in this act. With these words, I hand over the mic back to Siddhartha for further proceeding. Thank you.
Is there any question from anyone, if at all? Otherwise, we will carry on with the formal Thanksgiving. I think we would need another session with JP sir to even ask questions. Anyway, thank you so much, sir. And on behalf of the Income Tax Bar Association, I thank you all and wish a very happy and prosperous new year ahead. And of course, some kind of relaxation from the department as of the deadlines are concerned. So looking forward to brighter days ahead. Thank you very much. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you so much. We'll wind up.